Warning, I say a lot of bad words. If you're under 13, you probably shouldn't be watching this. Metroidvanias have kind of blown up over the past decade, though mainly within the indie scene as opposed to the AAA video game Duracell battery industry. Given how both the franchises that this poorly titled genre's name is derived from had essentially died for most of the 2010s, after entries with only a superficial resemblance to the franchises that gave birth to them. And with Metroid only recently coming back with Samus Returns and Dread, and Castlevania still being gone because Konami hates you, probably doesn't come off as too big a surprise that a bunch of people just decided to fill that void, since obviously the greedy multi-billion-dollar corporations weren't going to do that. It reflects pretty badly on both Nintendo and Konami's end, since the genre they essentially co-created was innovated and refined not by them, but by a bunch of smaller game developers, while they left the itch people had for these games unscratched for years. It all worked out though, because we got some pretty banger titles with games like Ori and the Blind Forest and Will of the Wisps being personal favorites of mine, and Bloodstained pretty much taking the place of Castlevania on the game side of things. Part of me still finds it hard to believe that Konami even allowed the Castlevania anime to exist. Though perhaps the most acclaimed and recognizable game to come out of this was 2017's Hollow Knight, developed by indie studio Team Cherry. Apparently it started off as a game jam project that wasn't received all that well, so if you feel like you'll never amount to anything, here's a bit of optimism for you. Look where Hollow Knight started out versus where it ended up. God knows we need more of that optimism with all of the pessimists out there. Thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign, Hollow Knight and Team Cherry were given the opportunity to blow everyone away. Now, I don't claim to represent the rest of the gaming community's opinions, but I think it did alright. It released to critical acclaim, being labeled as one of the best games of the year it came out. And that's saying a lot, given that 2017 was a year packed with plenty of critical darlings. And I suppose it's oddly fitting to talk about a game set in a world ravaged by disease, given everything from the past couple of years. I need to lighten the mood. Here's a kitty. There's a sequel called Hollow Knight Silksong coming out eventually, I think. I'll probably have come out to my family before Silksong comes out to the rest of the planet, but the original game should be substantial enough for the time being. Let's dive right in, shall we? You begin Hollow Knight controlling this tiny mysterious protagonist, very ambiguously named the Knight, who visits a completely bleak and wrecked civilization known as Hallownest. Starting off in a ghost town called Dirtmouth where travelers from long ago would pass through, but now it's pretty much abandoned with all the citizens lured down the well into the kingdom of Hallownest by promises of glory and fortune, only to never return. The only one left being this elderly bug very cleverly named Elderbug. Upon descending into the well, the Knight comes across the horrific sight of pretty much every part of Hallownest being a shithole completely ravaged by a widespread plague. Not much is really made all that clear at first, other than the pretty obvious issue of everything being in ruins, infested with wild beasts, and infected zombie bug people. Team Cherry is an Australian-based development team, so my theory is that this entire game is based on what one or more of the team members saw when going out into their backyard. Well, either that or checking under their couch cushions. Hollow Knight is a bit of a tricky bastard to talk about concerning the story, mainly because most of the story stuff has already happened before you even start the actual game. There's quite a few details that could easily go disregarded, unnoticed, or even just not looked at all. Due to just the sheer scope of the lore and world building, just about anything I say about it would only really scratch the surface of this almost endless rabbit hole. The whole game is shrouded in mystery concerning what the fuck happened here, what your main end goal is, the reasons for why you're doing what you're doing, and even just who you, the Knight, are. Most of the story and lore can be found through NPC dialogue, item descriptions, and random inscriptions found throughout the environments. You're going to need to do a fair bit of legwork to uncover a number of the mysteries present within the world of Hollow Knight, though it is all worth it in the end because this entire setting is really fascinating in terms of visual and environmental storytelling. Hallownest is absolutely massive and segmented into many different areas. None of this expansive area goes to waste, as every area is characterized by those who inhabited it, the history, and what purpose they served in the grand scheme of things before Hallownest fell to ruin. It all feels so cohesive and like a living and breathing, well, once living and breathing world, due to how much thought was placed into the environmental storytelling. It's very reminiscent of the kind of storytelling you'd see in a game such as Metroid Prime or Dark Souls, for lack of a more original but still accurate comparison. Going in, neither you nor the Knight themselves knows what's what in this round of Plague Inc. Evolved, and this brings in the perfect opportunity to cement the player into the role of the Knight, so they can both simultaneously learn and uncover the complex history and unsettling mysteries to be found deeper and deeper in this place. A lot of things in this game are purposefully left vague and up to your own interpretation. The minimal amount of obvious characterization given to the knight allows both their motivation for diving deep into Hallownest along with the player's motivation for doing so to be one and the same. You never quite know for sure if the other survivors you come across are friendly faces, or if they think you're a little shit and want to take your lunch money. Or, I guess in this case, Lunch Geo. Most notably is the character Hornet, whom the knight crosses paths with multiple times. She starts off as sort of an antagonist towards the knight, but they eventually begin working together as they both get deeper into the kingdom and begin to better understand what's going on. She's cute. Oftentimes though, it seems like a lot of the survivors are just casually going on with their everyday lives, sitting around like there's nothing wrong. Sure, the entire kingdom is overrun by disease, zombies, and monsters everywhere, but the shopkeepers and cartographer are just vibing and don't give a fuck. This really says a lot about our society, I think. Throughout the whole game, there's this melancholy undertone that seems sorrowful over all the great advancements, beautiful architecture, and citizens' lives that are all destroyed and decaying because of both the plague and the hubris of those in charge. But there are elements of levity that keep it from being an overwhelming downer of a game, mainly in the form of dark comedy and moments where the game lets you soak in the beauty of the world in spite of everything going on around it. Hollow Knight has quite a lot of charm to it in a weird, depressing kind of way. This is a game about 2D hand-drawn bug people after all. Don't go in expecting Silent Hill or The Last of Us levels of depression. Most of what you experience in-game is basically uncovering and piecing together the aftermath of past events, because the actual events you yourself take part in and directly cause are a lot more simple and easy to digest. At first, one could easily mistake this game as having little to no story at all, but that couldn't be further from reality. There's a lot to the seemingly simplistic in-game moments. Something draws the knight back to the kingdom of Hallownest after they departed from it long ago. They descend from Dirtmouth to the Forgotten Crossroads, make their way through Greenpath and the Fungal Wastes, until they reach the City of Tears where they finally get an objective of some kind. Travel through the world to unlock 3 seals, and then defeat the final boss, which is either the titular Hollow Knight, or the Radiants depending on if you did all the required objectives to fight the Radiants. Spoiler alert, I myself didn't. A few parts of this game made me almost pop a blood vessel, and I didn't feel like putting myself through excess frustration just to possibly keep internet meanies from calling me bad names about it. I might go back and try that stuff later, but for now I'm good. Your main objective is to get rid of the infection throughout Hallownest, and depending on whether the Hollow Knight or the Radiance is the final boss you went for, the ending is going to be a lot different based on that. Essentially, any ending with the Hollow Knight being the final boss will have the Knight absorb the infection and take his place, while any ending with the Radiance being the final boss will get rid of the plague altogether, the latter obviously being a bit more optimistic and conclusive than the former. The outcome of all that happens in Hollow Knight is well and truly what you make of it, both in how the player interprets certain vague details, as well as what route you choose to take when it comes to certain character stories. The ending, while the most significant thing the player has influence over, is only one example of this. Maybe to some people, the knight is just a brave adventurer who wants to go on a perilous journey of exploration, or maybe to some other people, the knight is just some random loser who gets pleasure out of hunting dangerous game, who also just happened to come across some prophecy they're an important part of. Or maybe they're only subconsciously doing everything they do before even knowing why for sure. Realistically, there's only so much justice I alone would be able to do for this game, given just the sheer scale of everything, and I don't want to sound like I'm just reading off wiki articles. They've made like 50 different expansions to this game, guys, cut me some slack. A lot of my and others' understanding of the narrative largely comes down to all the years of work Hollow Knight's large and dedicated fanbase put into piecing everything together. I feel like that more than anything is a true testament as to how much Team Cherry succeeded in creating a deep, fascinating world to get lost in. For an indie studio's crowdfunded debut title, that is a damn impressive accomplishment. Hollow Knight is a 2D action-adventure game where you explore a large interconnected world, find new abilities and items that allow you further access to new areas on the map, as well as hidden items, and fight off a large selection of enemies and bosses that are thankfully not too hard to defeat.
I lied.
As mentioned around the start of the video, Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania, obviously taking quite a bit of inspiration from both franchises. Throughout the game, you're not given much in the way of direction, and a large part of the experience is exploring and figuring out where you can and can't get to with your current moveset. Hollow Knight is largely non-linear in how it's built, and for the overwhelming majority of it, you're isolated and have to rely on your own senses and skill set to survive. In spite of the lack of direction given to you for most of the game, especially before you're able to obtain maps for each area in Hallownest, I rarely ever found myself actually getting lost or stuck. The world is super well designed and it does a fantastic job naturally guiding you on where the game wants you to go. Hit a dead end? Just turn around and find another way. Area blocked off or out of reach because you don't have the appropriate ability to surpass it? Come back later. Obviously you're not supposed to go there yet. Doofus. Level design for the style of game just about requires every fragment of the world to mesh and work well connected together. It isn't just individual levels linked together by a few hallways or corridors. Everything is designed in a manner where each location is intertwined and overlaps with the rest. Your progress through Hallownest will gradually take you deeper underground to areas that are a lot more dangerous and infested with stronger enemies. The game really lets you take in how screwed up everything got as you uncover the history of the world. The game explicitly would prefer for you to explore without much assistance from a map, but fuck that. Nintendo introduced the map feature in Super Metroid for a reason. I'm getting me map. In order to get a map of the area you're currently in, you'll need to visit Cornifer the cartographer and buy one from him. Typically, it's not that difficult to find him, you just need to listen around for him humming. It's easy to distinguish, and it will haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. Please help me, I can't sleep. Afterwards, you should find a literal paper trail that'll lead you directly to him, where you can then buy the map. You'll also need to buy a pin to mark your spot on the map, because even during the end of days, the oppressive grip of capitalism will never die. Hallownest is a big fucking map to explore everything in. The number of areas to visit well surpasses double digits, and that's just the base game without any expansions. You will be backtracking and passing through the same areas on multiple occasions. This is a Metroidvania after all, though things like the Stag Beetle stations and the various transports throughout the world cut down on a lot of downtime between areas, and make even the farthest spaced out areas in Hallownest still feel linked together. I can't stress this enough, the way every area in this game is linked together is nothing short of mind-blowing. It's clear that a lot of thought and effort went into making Hallownest this grand, convincing setting, while also making it fun to explore. I can't properly articulate my mental reaction when it hit me that the City of Tears is always under heavy rain because it was built below a big-ass lake. Like, damn, that is some fine attention to detail. Also, any Metroidvania that has you explore a place, and that place has you end up looping back around to the starting area, gets an automatic 10 out of 10 from me. Game designers, please never stop doing this, it's super cool. Control-wise, Hollow Knight feels like a dream. Movement on the ground is satisfying, attacking feels pretty natural and flows pretty well with normal traversal. Jumping can be a bit weird at first with how little height you get without holding the button down, but it's easy to get accustomed to. Feels great. Combat, at least starting off, is pretty basic, given that you have one weapon, that being this little sword referred to as a needle. Later on, a few other abilities like this projectile attack add a bit more to your moveset, which is appreciated. In a vacuum, the combat in Hollow Knight is dirt simple, but the enemies and bosses are what make it interesting and feeling fresh all the way through your long journey. The enemy variety here is pretty large, with a lot of them being airborne, blocking with a shield, still potentially hurting you upon death, using their own distinct attack patterns, and having stronger or longer ranged attacks. Every foe is its own distinct threat towards you, and a big part of the challenge in this game is finding the ideal way to kill them without dying yourself. It really shows how creative you can get with even the most rudimentary of combat or game mechanics. Speaking of challenges, prepare for death. It'll happen to all of us at some point, and you'll never quite know when your last day on Earth will be, so live the best life you can until then. Also, Hollow Knight is very difficult. You will get screwed over pretty hard if you don't keep up with the more demanding and relentless enemies throughout the game. It's rarely, if ever, rip your hair out frustrating, but your mastery of the combat and platforming will be tested a lot throughout the game. It's all so well paced and buttery smooth. Aside from a select few moments I found pretty bullshit, frickin' Watcher Knights can go eat dirt, and screw that one bit where you have to carry a flower for a long distance without taking any damage, Hollow Knight is a fair and challenging game despite its steep difficulty. One thing that does help a bit is the expansive laundry list of charms that give the knight some extra buffs when equipped. How useful you find some charms compared to others will mainly depend on personal preference, but they're all equally viable for letting you have a more customizable playstyle. Just keep in mind, some charms are notably more useful for certain bosses than others are. Don't be conservative about swapping them out every now and again. Also, there's no doubt that people who are way better at Hollow Knight than I am have used the charms to break this game like a twig, and I refuse to believe they're actually from this planet. Aliens exist, this is my proof. Each hit that you land on an enemy will fill up your soul meter, which can be used for regaining health, or later on for an energy projectile. It's a useful mechanic, though you need to know when the right and wrong times are to use it. Given that healing takes a long period of standing still and holding down a button, you could very easily find yourself losing more health than what you're gaining back. Your health is represented by white masks in the corner that are each 1 hit point. If you lose all of your health, you die and then you respawn at the last bench you rested at. As much as it kills me on the inside to probably be the literal millionth person to compare Hollow Knight to Dark Souls, it's kinda hard not to, given how much clear inspiration comes from that game. One of those being that upon death, you lose all the stuff you collected. Afterwards, the knight will have to go find his shade in the spot he died in, kill it to become whole again, and hopefully get all the money you lost back so it's not gone forever. Personally, I really like it when games have a system like this in place for whenever you fail. Unlike a game over screen or just respawning at an earlier point, this feels like something that actually penalizes the player upon entering a fail state, instead of a minor inconvenience that's ultimately inconsequential. Depending on where you died, you could be trekking a lot of ground before you get back to the place where you died, which I feel sometimes is more irritating and stressful than necessary, though it is all the more of a motivation to better nail the simple but difficult to master mechanics. As to be expected from this genre, your moveset at the beginning is bare bones as fuck, with several additional abilities scattered throughout Hallownest. You're constantly limited on where and what you can visit based on the abilities you've gained, and with each new one you find, you feel like you've earned just that little extra bit of flexibility in exploring and combat. A lot of the time, you come across something that requires you to use an ability you just don't have at the moment. Most of the time, you know exactly what you need, or at least have a vague idea of what you need, with the game pretty much taunting you with that fact for much of the runtime, and it makes finally getting that ability all the more fulfilling. Just about every unlockable ability is utilized pretty well in fighting and exploring, since most of them have a practical use in both situations. Stuff like the dash, double jump, and wall jumping are useful for that little extra bit of height and distance for reaching previously blocked off areas, as well as dodging and jumping over attacks from normal enemies and bosses. Truthfully, I really can't think of all that much wrong with Hollow Knight because it's just so damn solid all around. Like, yeah, there's typical things like a few bullshit bosses, Traitor Lord can eat 20 S's, fucking piece of shit. Sometimes the backtracking can feel a bit monotonous due to the sheer size of the map, and I don't know, probably something else. A lot of areas in this game are pretty difficult, especially as you get to areas like the Ancient Basin and, oh god, fucking Deep Nest, as well as many of the optional side challenges darted throughout the world. There's some stuff I didn't do, but it's not because I thought it was bad or dragged the game down or anything. I just personally didn't feel like doing it at the moment. Other players definitely will though, so that's great. But even without all that stuff, Hollow Knight's main game is still pretty substantial on its own. When I first played it, it took me a little under 30 hours to beat the whole thing start to finish. So even if you only do the mandatory stuff, you're looking at a pretty meaty game for its low price of $15. Honestly, this game could be $60 and I'd still say it's worth it. I'd sooner pay that much for this game than half of what the AAA industry puts out. Oh, and apparently the price of some AAA games is $70 now because fuck you, customer! Suddenly I feel less bad about not having a PS5. Not that I'd currently be able to get one, because some executives still thought it'd be a good idea to launch new game systems in the middle of an economically devastating pandemic, where everything is in short supply so they're all being taken by scalpers selling them online for absurd prices, and also by shitty crypto miners snatching all the GPUs to make terrible, environmentally harmful art that they sell for $5 billion a piece. Modern gaming is a fucking mess. All I want to do is play Rift Apart, but the universe fucking hates me. I think I got off track. But yeah, Hollow Knight, pretty good game. Definitely worth the price. And that's just ignoring the art and music. Hollow Knight has an entirely hand-drawn style with all the 2D character sprites, backgrounds, and additional environmental details being sketched out and later digitally scanned onto the computer. All the characters have this simplistic look to them with few facial features aside from pitch black eyes and possibly mouths, stubby arms and legs, and a limited number of animation frames. Enemies tend to be a bit more varied in terms of design, but they do still fit pretty organically alongside the knight and the rest of the cast. It's just really cute and charming, and the animations for each design are really effective for things that in a video game need to be clarified, mainly enemy attack patterns. In gameplay, the raw character animation on the knight doesn't really do too much to convey what action you're performing, but that's not an issue because of the effect animations. They do wonders in making the combat seem more flashy and punchy. You can really feel the impact of when you strike an enemy, kill an enemy, or even get hit yourself. It feels really powerful. This all happens fast enough that you subconsciously don't really notice it in gameplay, but it really helps the presentation. The backgrounds have sort of a monochromatic look to them. All the areas are largely comprised of different shades of the same primary color choice. The crystal mines are different shades of violet, Green Path is, well, green, City of Tears is dark blue, and the Ancient Basin is just about entirely achromatic, with there being almost nothing but various shades of gray and black. It's a beautiful looking game all around, with some of my all-time favorite art direction from any game ever. The amount of detail put into everything is really something else. I can't imagine how long it took to sketch all this out. And the color choices are all thought out well enough so that the player and enemies still stick out and don't visually get lost in the backgrounds. Another smart color choice here is the one they went for the plague. It's represented with this bright orange, which you almost never see used anywhere else in the game, and it also sticks out pretty effectively from the environments. It gives the plague more of a dangerous presence because you always see it everywhere you go. Seeing it overtake the Forgotten Crossroads more and more throughout the game just accentuates how devastating it is. It's atmospheric as hell, and the ambient sound design makes everything feel so much more alive and organic. The echo and reverb when you enter a cave, Fog Canyon's muffled sound effects and music, the rain in City of Tears that also gets muffled whenever you go into one of the buildings, the unsettling bug noises you hear in Deep Nest. It works so well to immerse you into this world. And just as beautiful as the visuals and general sound design is the music. Being composed mainly with piano and violin, it sounds appropriately melancholy, but it's also really relaxing and peaceful, which is probably a necessity given... Make sure you don't do anything to damage or break your controllers, they're not very cheap to replace. For most of the game, the music is relatively soothing, though it appropriately ramps up in volume and pace for the boss fights. A personal favorite track of mine is Green Path, with how it's that little extra bit more upbeat, appropriate for an area that's still teeming with life compared to just about everywhere else. The music that you hear in the Stag Beetle stations is great for radiating an aura of safety and relief, diffusing much of the tension that comes from exploring Hallownest. Though the track that's my definitive favorite is undoubtedly City of Tears. It perfectly captures how grand the centerpiece of Hallownest is, reflecting on the beauty of the city that's still intact, while also being mournful of all those who died or became twisted, corrupted versions of themselves. The choir singing adds so much emotion to this piece and makes it just so damn powerful as a piece of music. My first entry into the City of Tears is when it really started hitting me just how great Hollow Knight is, and the soundtrack plays a huge role in that. As far as indie Metroidvanias go, Hollow Knight is easily one of the best ones I've ever played, and in many ways it actually surpasses all the games that inspired it. You'll get quite a lot out of it if you're a fan of this type of game. I can imagine it might be a bit intimidating if you're only just getting into Metroidvanias, and in that case I'd probably recommend something like the Ori games as an entry point first before you go into Hollow Knight. That said, don't let anything you hear about difficulty or lack of direction put you off from at least giving it a go. Those two things do not detract from the game whatsoever. It's a really fun game with amazing art direction and really interesting, well thought out world building. Given the methods in which Hollow Knight handles exploration and the typical Metroidvania conventions, in my opinion, this is a pretty strong contender for the gold standard of the genre. Hollow Knight is on every major platform for about the same price, so regardless of whichever of these four things you mainly use, you'll have a pretty reliable way of playing Hollow Knight, rest assured. It's probably going to be a bit of a lengthy wait before Silksong finally comes out, so if by any chance you haven't played Hollow Knight yet, you've got plenty of time, so go fix that and have the time of your life. Anyways, that's it for me, hope y'all enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, sharing, subscribing, and hitting that bell icon so YouTube doesn't make you forget I exist. I feel like it'd be somewhat appropriate to follow up this video on a fantastic example of a Metroidvania, with a video on a less than fantastic game that actually comes from the Metroid series. That's gonna be a fucking trip and a half, but until then, take care and thanks for watching. I'm out.